Good evening and welcome. This is going to be an interesting evening and a great debate. But these things by themselves, by their very nature, are partisan in that people who are here are supporting their own candidates. And that's to be encouraged, because after all of the things that these four candidates have gone through in the last 70 days, plus the months before the writ was dropped, it is truly worthy of their support. So congratulations for coming, and congratulations to all of our candidates. Now, I just want to know that there might be some non-partisan people here tonight, and I want, by a show of hands, somebody to see the people who have not made a decision, that the people who are actually we have to speak with. Hands up? Wow, that's great. So candidates, you know the people to whom you must speak tonight. Now, before I detail the timing, I want to mention that tonight is specifically designed to ask as many questions of the candidates as possible. The Chamber received hundreds of emailed questions during the run-up of this debate, and we've had them edited by Merv Unger and Daniel from the YPN, and we are also welcoming so many of them from the floor. There are YPN members around. Want to ask a question, put your hand up, they'll give you a chit, and then fill it out, and they'll bring it up to Merv to edit and to organize duplicates and that kind of thing. So here's the timing, and thanks again to Dirk and Tammy for keeping track of all of this. The candidates will have a three-minute opening address. The written questions directed at individual candidates will have a 60-second response, and candidates may use one of four rebuttal chits for 30 seconds. And candidates will have a 2-minute closing address. So let's get started. The order of speaking has been chosen beforehand, and we'll start off with Green Party Representative Paul Manley.
All right. Thank you. I'd like to acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of the Nanaimo First Nation. I'd like to thank the Chamber for putting on this event and for all of you for attending. And I'd like to thank my family, my wife Samantha, daughter Avon, daughter EJ, my parents Jim and Eva, for their support. I was born and raised on Vancouver Island. My grandfather had a farm out off Jinglepot Road. That's where my dad grew up. And Nanaimo has always been home for me. I've lived in other places in Canada, out in Ontario, but this is where I chose to raise my family. I have a degree in global studies and media studies, and I have extensive experience in business and management, both at nonprofit and for-profit level. For 23 years, I've been making documentary and educational films about economic, social, and environmental issues. As a filmmaker, I've done my research. I speak to people with a broad range of perspectives and listen to what they have to say, weigh the issues, and then represent them in a way that's fair and balanced. Often I'm giving voice to people who are voiceless in the media. I would love to be able to do that as your Member of Parliament. I'm really stoked about Green Party policy. I'm excited about it. I was pleasantly surprised when I read Vision Green about the breadth and scope of this policy book. 175 pages, it's all online. It's full of common sense solutions to complex problems. It's going to take a lot of work to accomplish, but it's things that we can do. How to make our social programs, not just defend them, how to make them more effective and efficient. How do we create good jobs in our community with a stable economy, supporting small business, the high-tech sector, moving away from rip and ship resource extraction and using our resources to maximize jobs and a good stable economy. And how do we do that without sacrificing the environment? At the core is democracy. making sure that every vote counts with proportional representation, but also making sure that you're represented, that your voice is heard in Ottawa. And that's what I'm here to do. Take your voice to Ottawa. Many of you know me. I'm a strong community advocate, and I've been speaking out for this community for a long time. On October 19th, I'm asking for your support so I can represent you in Ottawa and take your voice to Ottawa. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you. And now representing the New Democratic Party is Sheila Malcolmson. Please welcome her.
Thank you for coming tonight. Thank you for hosting us. And thanks to Nanaimo people for having us on their territory. I am a proud resident of this region for 20 years. I live on Gabriola Island with my partner Howard, who's somewhere in the crowd tonight. He's a fisheries biologist and a climate researcher. My background is environmental and resource studies. I've worked in the environmental movement. I've worked as a ratepayer advocate, and also many years in small business with a particular focus on tourism. And flowing from all of that, I was honored to be elected 4 times in my community to local government, including the last 6 years as chair of Islands Trust Council. And from all of those experiences, I have learned how ecology is at the foundation of everything in our region, environment, community, economy. And I've learned how important it is to have principled, strong leadership, to stand up with coastal people and for coastal people, and to stand up for the coast. And that has been sadly lacking for us with our federal representation the last 10 years. We have seen the Conservative government undermine environmental regulations. We've seen working people working harder and harder and not getting ahead. We've seen seniors be made to feel vulnerable just at the time that they should feel more protected. And we are hearing again and again how ready this community is for change. And so we are, have to say as well, we're still hearing a lot of support for the Conservatives on the doorstep, and we do know that they've won these elections here 75% of the times out of the last 22 years of elections in that region. Yeah. So we are working hard right down to the October 19 final vote. We're talking with people everywhere in the region, and we are hearing more and more excitement about the possibility of changing the government in Ottawa, of having, of having a government that works with us and for us and reflects our values and has our back. And I look forward to talking with you tonight about the NDP plan to support young families, to support full-time jobs, to work with small business around job generation in the region. And with your support, we can elect a member of parliament that can work with you and for you and stand up for the coast. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila. Thank you. And now for the Liberal Party, please welcome Tim Tessier.
It'll take me a while to figure out the tools. You know, I prepared a 3-minute opening. I'm going to speak a little bit back to the heart. Someone said to me way back in July as I knocked on her door, her name was Beverly in Harewood, and she was caring for her husband who was in late stages Alzheimer's. And when I spoke to her, she talked about her support for our leader, Mr. Trudeau. And he represented a new vision for Canada that she had never seen before. Beverly was 82 years old, and I graciously thanked her for her support. Asked her if she would be kind enough to put a sign in the front of her lawn. And she leaned toward me and she said, "Tim, I can't do that. When you live in Nanaimo, everyone thinks you're supposed to vote NDP." Well, I'm here to say we have a different plan. And we have a solution for Canada that will make a better Canada. And for those of you in the crowd that put your hand up and said, "I have not decided," you're part of anywhere between 30 and 40% of the voters here in Nanaimo Ladysmith. And you owe it to yourself to talk to your friends, to go to work tomorrow, to spend time with your family. Take a look at the plans. Go online and see what real change is about, not just change of government. We cannot afford another 4 years. Mr. Harper is done. His economy is a mess. The rhetoric and his bullying throughout this campaign is disgusting. And that's not the Canada that I grew up in, nor do I want my children and grandchildren to grow up in. We have an opportunity to make some change, so be sure you get out and vote, bring your friends out to vote, and pick a plan that works for you, that works for Canada. You'll hear throughout the night lots of promises of dollars. Ask yourself, can we spend those dollars? If so, how are we spending them and how are we being responsible for them? Because that's the key. It's one thing to stand before you in an arena like this and say, "We're going to give you this." But who's paying for it? Well, we've come out and we've made the courageous choice of telling you how we're going to pay for it. We're investing in Canada. So thank you again. Vote Tim, vote Liberal on October 19th.
Thank you, Tim. And yes, it is time for our Conservative candidate, Mark MacDonald.
Thank you. Good evening. I want to thank everybody for coming in the Nanaimo Chamber for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight and to thank all the viewers who are watching on television as well. My name is Mark MacDonald and I'm standing with the Conservative Party because thanks to the Conservative government's policies, Canadian workers and businesses are enjoying the lowest federal tax burden in over 50 years. As a result, yes, that's true. As a result, your take-home pay is higher. Businesses are able to invest in new products and create jobs for more workers, and Canada's economy can grow and move forward despite global economic instability. In 2015 alone, our low tax plan will return as much as $6,600 of tax relief and enhanced benefits back into your hands. I've listened to the candidates over the past few debates, and there is one thing that's becoming strikingly clear. The other candidates are on a shopping spree in an attempt to win your vote with no credible plan to pay for the promises that they're making. Justin Trudeau's Liberals are following Kathleen Wynne's plan. Ontario is now a have-not province and is twice the debt of California. A state with as many people, is twice as many people as our entire country. Or sorry, the same amount of people. In fact, according to the Financial Post, Ontario is now the world's most indebted sub-sovereign borrower. Only the Conservative plan has a plan to protect our economy, and we are focused on Canada's key priorities. Thank you. Only the Conservative Party will provide more tax relief and benefits to families and seniors, lower taxes on job-creating small businesses. We will keep the federal budget balanced and create another 1.3 million well-paying jobs by 2020. Only our party will open markets through trade agreements like the historic Trans-Pacific Partnership and add more than 700,000 new homeowners by 2020. TPP supporters, I see. And of course, we're the only party that will provide funding for the foot passenger service between downtown Nanaimo and Vancouver, a project I personally worked on for over 18 months. Friends, the Liberals will raise personal and payroll taxes on families, seniors, workers, and small businesses. They'll saddle our children and grandchildren with debt and put hundreds of thousands of Canadian jobs at risk. On the other hand, The NDP can't be trusted to do what they say they're going to do. In a recent interview about the Kinder Morgan pipeline, the NDP candidate said, quote, "The trick is to say we are. Just simply saying no to things has not gotten us as far ahead as we want to be." Well, no kidding. This, of course, was reminiscent of the last provincial election. Friends, Nanaimo Ladysmith deserves an MP on the government side of the House. We've seen what an NDP... Okay. Vote for me, October 19th.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, and thanks all of you for your initial presentations. Now, I have in my hand here the first 4 questions, and I pre-read them because I can't read bad handwriting. And I want to mention that I feel like I'm in a Habs game in Montreal where the fans seem to know as much as the players. These are in-depth questions, very meaty. And so the first one is to Tim Tessier. Is not the pro-choice stand required for Liberal candidates in conflict with the party's belief in freedom of religion and its various modes of expression? Tim, 60 seconds.
Could you read that again?
Sure. There are a lot of words in it, it's true. Is not the pro-choice stand required for Liberal candidates in conflict with the party's belief in freedom of religion and its various modes of expression?
Sounds like it's a conflicting question. So let me go to the heart of the matter. And the heart of the matter is, why do 50% of our population not have the choice to make what they feel is in their best interest, in their body's best interests? That's what this comes down to, is the ability to respect. I'm a father, I'm a son, and I'm a husband. And it's one of these things, to me, we shouldn't even have this conversation at this point in our society's history. This is up to the women to decide. Bottom line.
Thank you, Tim. The next question is for Mark MacDonald. Conservatives have promised consecutive surpluses and lower taxes. How do they propose to reduce the federal debt and reinstate cut programs for vets, First Nations, healthcare, scientists, and environment?
Thank you. Well, clearly, cutting taxes is working. The economy is chugging along just fine. Thank you very much. It's interesting, you know, the Trudeau comes out with these amazing lies. Like, if, for example, like, put Canada in a deficit this year, false. Canada's actually running a surplus. That Conservative government has made cuts to Aboriginal affairs, false. Spending has increased by $2 billion. They made cuts to Veterans Affairs, the Liberals say. False. Veterans Affairs spending has increased by 35%. And also, they caused the weakening of the middle class. That's another one. And it's like Canada's middle class is the strongest in the entire world. So I don't even get some of the accusations. I mean, there should be some truth serum passed out, I would think. So.
Thank you, Mark. And a rebuttal from Sheila. 30 seconds, Sheila, please.
The Conservative real record is having racked up $130 billion in debt since they took power 10 years ago. They've lost 400,000 manufacturing jobs, and Harper calls exporting raw logs innovation. That's not our picture of how an economy should be run.
Thanks for that rebuttal, Sheila. The next question is for Paul Manley. Oh, sorry. Tim, another rebuttal, 30 seconds, please.
It bothers me that we have to listen to what's going on in California. I'll start with that. To have a statement made that they're going to balance the budget, why have they waited 10 years? The last balanced budget was simply a shell game, and you had to go down to the waterfront to pay $5 to figure out what it meant. We do not need that type of a balanced budget. We need innovation, creativity, and a vision for a better Canada.
Thank you, Tim. Now, this question is for Paul Manley. What is the Green Party position on the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and how is it different from the position of other parties?
Well, we're opposed to the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and for the main reason that it contains an investor-state provision, a provision that gives corporations, foreign corporations, rights over our democracy, the right to sue our democratically elected governments for laws and policies that protect our citizens. Good public policy that protects the environment, protects labor standards, protects health and safety standards. I'll give you an example. Australia was being sued by Philip Morris under one of these investor-state provisions for putting safety warnings on cigarette packs. They're being sued for hundreds of millions of dollars for the loss of potential profit. The Green Party is the only party that opposes these investor-state provisions in trade agreements. The NDP has voted for them with the Canada-Korea Free Trade Agreement, which would see coal mines on Vancouver Island and more raw log exports. The Liberals invented this process, and the Conservatives, they signed us over to China with the Canada-China FIPA agreement.
Speaking of partisan, the next question, I'm sorry, Tim, I'll pay more attention to your rebuttals next time. 30 seconds, please, Tim.
Let me start by saying this. It bothers me that Elizabeth May has come out in the public, as has my colleague, and said, we're going to tear up all of the trade agreements. Let's tear up all the trade agreements, close the borders, and let's not do international trade. There are big holes. There are big holes in the TPP. There are some big holes in the TPP.
Thank you, Tim. Okay, the next question is for Sheila Malcolmson. Is it true that all NDP candidates voted in favor of the Korea Free Trade Agreement, which contains investor-state dispute settlement provisions? Is it also true that Korean companies own most of the coal licenses on Vancouver Island? What guarantee can you give Nanaimo Ladysmith that you will not be whipped to vote against Islanders' environmental concerns?
Before I agreed to stand for the nomination for the NDP, I got really clear that locally elected members of parliament stand up first for their communities, and that's the basis on which I'm running. If I have the honor of being your member of parliament, then my first obligation is to you. I'm also really proud to learn, as I've gotten deeper into this, that the NDP caucus makes its decision-making based on a consensus model. So there are basic principles that the caucus speaks to, learns from each other, does what they can to reach consensus on decisions, and there's a dialogue. And the New Democrat principles are ones that I can stand up with, can stand with, but my first obligation is to you. I learned that well in my local government, and I wouldn't have been reelected 4 times if I didn't stand up for the people of the coast.
And Mark, 30-second rebuttal, please.
Thank you. I know the NDP candidate said she wants to be like her predecessor. The last 2 years, the NDP has voted 100% behind their leader, behind Thomas Mulcair. 100%. The Liberals about 95%, and the Conservatives about 75%. So you need to factor that in. She's going to toe, if she gets in, she's going to toe the party line because that's what NDP candidates do. They will not represent you, they'll represent the party.
Thank you, Mark. Now, this next question is for all candidates, and we'll start off with Sheila, and then we'll work our way down to Mark. Here's the question. How much will your party increase transfer payments to the provinces to fulfill your promises, since infrastructure, education, health, and pharmacare fall under provincial, not federal jurisdiction? So it says, how much will your party increase transfer payments to the provinces to fulfill your promises, since infrastructure, education, health, and pharmacare fall under provincial, not federal jurisdiction? Sheila, please. 60 seconds.
Structure, the NDP is committed to transferring an extra 1 cent of the gas tax over to infrastructure investments that it would partner with local governments directly. So that is a direct democracy. Local governments set the tone. They identify the priorities, and we get into a pattern of there being long, consistent, stable funding, which I know from my local government experience is vital. On pharmacare, we've got a commitment around working with the provinces directly. They have to want to play ball on this one, but it would bring drug costs down. It would bring it would increase affordability for people in communities. It would be a good deal. I can't imagine the provinces wouldn't want to engage in that conversation. And most importantly, on both healthcare and education, NDP government would transfer funds with strings attached, which the federal Conservatives have failed to do. We can't be sending transfer payments into general revenue anymore.
Thank you. Thank you, Sheila. And Tim, you don't have to use one of your rebut chits right now. You're on. 60 seconds, please. No.
That's good. I'm going to start with pharmacare. As it is administered by the ministry here in British Columbia, it starts with leadership. We want to establish a national health program, working with the province to identify and bring the cost of drugs down for everyone. In regards to the infrastructure, we are going to increase infrastructure spending to the tune of over $60 billion over the next 10 years, both into the physical and social infrastructure. To give you an idea what that means for Nanaimo Ladysmith, we want to invest in more projects for seniors' homes. We want to invest in more affordable housing. On the physical infrastructure, we have some great South Nanaimo waterfront land that needs to be developed. Through our green infrastructure program, we can clean that up. So those are the funds that we will bring to Nanaimo Ladysmith. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Paul, I'll repeat the question for you.
Sure.
It's how much will your party increase transfer payments to the provinces to fulfill your promises, since infrastructure, education, health, and pharmacare fall under provincial, not federal jurisdiction?
Well, it would be foolish of me to give you a figure because that would be pulling it out of my hat. But we will transfer 1% of the GST directly to municipalities for infrastructure and 5% of the gas tax. We are proposing a Canadian Council of Governance that brings together all levels of government: federal, provincial, municipal, regional, and First Nations, to have a national discussion about what our priorities are, and then work towards those priorities on a provincial level and our regional level, so that when decisions are made at a regional level about economic development or how things are going to run, those decisions are made locally. And those discussions about our pharmacare program, that would have to be negotiated with the provinces. We will tie payments, transfer payments to performance on things like pharmacare, healthcare, and education. There's my bell.
Thank you, Paul. Please, Mark.
Well, how things really work is the federal government can't tell the provinces what to do with their finances. Despite the fact that since 2006, you know, the federal government has increased health transfers to the province from $20 billion to $34 billion, an increase of almost 70%. There are some provinces in Canada that are not meeting their obligations to fulfill their part of providing health care to Canada. But that's funded by the federal government. We have increased the funding significantly. And you know what? What the Conservative government has done is they have brought us to a balanced budget so that we, as we move forward with the promises that have been made, we actually have the money to pay for them. We're not going to load it on the backs of the people that are to come, our kids and our grandkids. The Conservative government has made significant investments in infrastructure while keeping taxes low and balancing the budget. If the other parties promise to increase spending in this area, they will have to raise taxes and run deficits.
Thank you, Mark. And thank you to all our candidates on answering that question. Now, this next question is for Sheila Malcolmson. And Sheila, your question is, what will the NDP do to help the disabled? Will they give them a living pension, which is a pension that people can live on? What would the NDP do to help the disabled? Sheila, 60 seconds, please.
We've been hearing a lot about this topic. Lots of people describing themselves working very hard in the community, not having the support that they need. We've heard a number like 795,000 disabled people across the country want to be working and are facing barriers to be able to do that. So the first NDP commitment is establishing a Canadians with Disabilities Act, legislation that would then guide how the provinces and local governments also work with and for people with disabilities. And we've got a whole series of pieces around commitments to work with the provinces to identify what income supports are available and to work with the frontline advocates that are doing such good work representing what solutions we need in the country. And I want to work for that.
Thank you, Sheila. This next question is for Mark MacDonald. Oh, I'm sorry, Paul.
So we know that a lot of people are having difficulties. People with disabilities are falling through the cracks in many places. Seniors on fixed incomes are having trouble. All kinds of low-income families are having a problem. We believe in a guaranteed livable income where every citizen has the basic level of income that they need for affordable housing, clothing, and shelter. And everybody would get it. The rich will be taxed back on it, but we want to make sure that everybody has their basic needs met, and we would eliminate the myriad different programs that people have to hoop through and the bureaucracy they need to deal with.
Thank you, Paul. This next question is for Mark MacDonald. What benefit is income splitting to the average Canadian, and who will pick up the slack? Who will pay the tax that the wealthy will not be paying? 60 seconds, please, Mark.
Income splitting actually was an idea that came from Nanaimo, of all places. Dr. David Copeland came up with the idea, and what the idea behind it is to produce fairness for families that have one member of the family staying at home. Previously, they would be punished from a tax perspective because the one person, the highest income earning individual, would be taxed at a higher rate. So it allows some fairness in the home and recognition of people that want to stay home, husband or wife, to look after the kids. Who's paying for it? Well, this is what happens when you put money back into the pockets of people. Surprise, they know how to spend their money better than the government does. They're spending money in the economy. The economy is doing well in Canada compared to every other nation in the world, and this is something that we need to be proud of. And when you cut taxes back for business, they hire more people, and that also stimulates the economy.
Thank you, Mark. And this next question is for Paul Manley. The Green Party's green economy, can you detail what it is and how it will create good jobs in this area? Paul, 1 minute, please.
Well, we believe that we need to move away from rip and ship primary resource extraction and get it back into value added. So we have a log ship that just pulled in here yesterday. It's loading up with raw logs, leaving the community. There used to be good mill jobs on the island. When I grew up here, all my buddies got jobs in the mill when they got out of high school. We have a growing tech sector in Nanaimo. And they're here because of the quality of life that we offer in this community. And it is second only to the tourism industry in terms of the dollars that it creates. We believe that we should be encouraging small business, environmentally sustainable companies, and moving away from just ripping and shipping resources and going into value added and making sure that we get good jobs for our resources and use our knowledge base and our skill base to build a resilient economy.
Thank you, Paul. The next question is for Tim Tessier. Please support, or rather, please comment on how you can support deficit financing in the view of our significant existing debt and the likelihood of increasing interest costs. Tim, 1 minute, please.
Well, I think the question answers itself. The interests are going to go up. The best time to lock in and invest in our future is now. We are, in different parts of the country, anywhere between 20 and 50 years behind in infrastructure investment. We do not have enough affordable housing, seniors' residences, or the facilities to train people to work in these homes and such. Investing today and paying the bill today when we have record low interest rates makes sense. It'll spin off and create a whole economy in its own, which creates jobs. Those people are paying bills, they're paying taxes. Economists around the world have said our plan is brilliant for it's brilliant for the times that we're in. We need to take the opportunity today. We simply cannot wait 4 or 5 years. This is on the heels of a government that has been running deficits of $20 billion a year. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. This next question is for Sheila and Mark. We'll start off with Sheila. The question is, I have not felt any or seen any impact from past Conservative and NDP MPs in Nanaimo. What will you do differently to change this, especially if your party leaders are not Prime Minister like the polls are suggesting? So bottom line is it says, I have not felt or seen any impact from past Conservative and NDP MPs in Nanaimo. What would you do differently?
Nanaimo has never had an NDP member of parliament that's been part of the government, and that is what we're trying to change this time around. We, for the first time, have the opportunity, if starting here, if Nanaimo Ladysmith sends an NDP member of parliament to Ottawa, being part of a progressive government for the first time, shares our values, has our back, wants to work with community groups, not against community groups. And New Democrats are the only party that has its hands clean on the Senate and spending scandals of the Liberals and Conservatives, the only party that has its hands clean on the bad relationship with Indigenous people, the residential school legacy. We have got an opportunity for having a Prime Minister that has our back, and that's the team that I'd like to be part of. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila.
Not
Mark,
sure.
1 minute, please.
I'm not sure what Sheila's view of this area is, but 2/3 of this riding has been under NDP control for 11 years. And it is the poverty that has the highest level of youth poverty here in South Nanaimo. I lay that right at the feet of the NDP. We've got nothing from the previous MP, and as far as what the previous Conservative gentleman delivered on our behalf, he was able to look after the whole city. We got funding for the water treatment plant. You enjoy the clean water in Nanaimo? That came from the federal government. The Nanaimo Airport, tremendous success. Funding from the federal government. Investment in the Port of Nanaimo, funding from the federal government, because you had an MP in the north part of the city who could look after the whole city. And finally, the foot passenger ferry. I worked on that for 18 months, and that's coming with a Conservative government, and that's the kind of thing that I want to do and bring to this city.
Yes, I thought you might. Sheila, 30 seconds, please.
To that list of Conservative legacies, voting in favor of closing down Coast Guard stations, voting in favor of eroding fisheries habitat protection, and voting against Gene Crowder's multi-year effort to finally find a comprehensive solution to the derelict vessel problem. North Nanaimo Conservative members of Parliament voted against all of these things, against the coast's interests.
Thank you, Sheila. And Mark, 30 seconds to rebut, please.
The derelict vessel issue was important, but the Crowder's bill was ill-conceived. It froze all the vessel's costs onto the taxpayer. The John Weston bill calls for the perpetrators to pay financially and if needed, jail time to clean up their own mess. You don't throw it on the back of the taxpayers. They made the mess, they need to clean it up. And that bill is sitting on the table in Ottawa ready to go. There's other 4 solutions that I've found to fix that derelict vessel situation, and I'm ready to go to work on them.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Sheila. The next question is for Paul Manley. You say you will not be subject to party discipline, but you will vote for the way your constituents want. What if your constituents want to sell bulk water? Would you support your party or your community? 1 minute on that one, please.
That is funny, isn't it? So, how many people here want to sell bulk water? Show of hands. Okay, I see 4 people. We want to protect our water, and we want to protect our watershed. We want to make sure that our watershed is publicly owned. That's a key piece of infrastructure. That's a key piece of infrastructure for our economy and for our environment. We just saw a drought this summer. You know, we've had this agreement signed, the Canada-China FIPA agreement. If the Chinese or the Koreans, which the NDP voted for, if they buy our watershed and then decide that they want to start selling bulk water and get a loophole in this thing, we're going to be dealing with lawsuits, hundreds of millions of dollars. We've been sold out with this, and that we need to protect our resources. We need to protect our community. We need to stand up and defend our community.
This question is for Mark MacDonald. Your campaign website indicates the information that you were named to the National Dean's List for academic achievement. The National Dean's List was a commercial directory, not an accredited academic body in the US. How does this reflect on you about the value and integrity of the public post-secondary education system here in Canada? Mark, 1 minute, please.
Wow. Somebody's really digging deep. That's the first I've heard about it, honestly. I make no apologies. When I was in university in California, I was there on a hockey scholarship, which I won when a 4-year scholarship at United States International University in San Diego. And I got a notification from some organization called the National Dean's List, and it was for the top 1% of all students in U.S. colleges and universities. I was very honored to get it. I was also in something called Who's Who in American Universities. The list includes astronauts and people of notoriety throughout the country, so I make no apologies about that. I didn't know about the organization. I was happy to have it. Still have the brochure. I thought it was a great honor. So, yeah.
Thank you, Mark. This next question is for Sheila Malcolmson and Tim Tessier. We'll start with Tim this time. Senior income splitting is important to me. If elected, will you carry it on in its present form? Senior income splitting. And Tim, please start it. 1 minute, please.
Well, that's the shortest question I've got this evening. So I'm going to give you the shortest answer. Yes. There has been advertising indicating otherwise. The Liberal Party of Canada is committed to maintaining income splitting for seniors and pensioners. Simple answer is yes. And it bothers me that it is being used as a wedge. We've had the opportunity to visit a number of seniors throughout this campaign, and it's almost like a telephone scam, where they're trying to convince seniors something that is not. And it is wrong. It's bad, bad politics. We will maintain income splitting for seniors.
Thank you, Tim. I'll repeat the question for Sheila. Senior income splitting is important to me. If elected, will you carry it on in its present form?
Yes, we will. And New Democrats will reverse the Conservatives' plans for the income splitting measure, which is more recent, which benefits only the wealthiest. We'll also roll back the increases to the tax-free savings account, again, which benefit the wealthiest people, and we want to apply that spending instead to the people that need it most. And that is to increase guaranteed income supplement for seniors, old age security for seniors, expansion of Canada Pension Plan, and spending to eradicate poverty in the region. And again, because likewise, there's been misinformation from the Conservative campaign on this one, we will be retaining the long-standing income splitting for seniors pension plan.
Thank you, Sheila. Now, this next question is for Mark MacDonald. What does multiculturalism mean to you, and how do you encourage it in Canada? What does multiculturalism mean to you, and how is it to be encouraged in Canada? 1 minute, please, Mark.
I think multiculturalism is very important to Canadians, and it's important to me. We have friends from all over the world, actually, and we have regular dinners and that at our home for people throughout the world. And I think the Conservative government's plans that they've already implemented regarding immigration allows people from other countries to come and add to the flavor of Canada. We're still a relatively young country, and interesting, Paul's always taking swipes at the Chinese. I have a lot of Chinese friends. Actually, they brought a lot to this country. They brought a lot to this country, as have Koreans, as have Africans, and we appreciate the melting pot that Canada is, and so I think it just adds to that. Not only their cultural values, but the food, the dress, the way they look at things. I appreciate it, and I'm very grateful that that is what Canada is.
Thank you, Mark. A 30-second rebuttal from Paul Manley, please.
So I have a great deal of respect for many, many cultures and for the Chinese. I have a problem with a government that won't bother sending the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister wouldn't go to the Beijing Olympics, but then he would turn around and let state-owned corporations decide whether our democratic decisions are going to hold in this country. So it doesn't matter whether it's Chinese or United States or Mexican corporations. We don't want foreign corporations dictating to us. Thank you very much. We believe in fair trade. We believe in trade that respects
Thank you, Paul.
our democracy.
This next question is to all candidates, and we'll start with Mark at the end and work our way down. The question is, what are your views on increasing immigration to Canada? Many of our programs and resources are already stretched at the expense of some Canadians. Should we be opening doors to a situation that may exacerbate existing problems? Mark, 1 minute, please.
Yeah, great question. Prior to the Syrian refugee crisis, the Prime Minister announced that the Conservatives were increasing the amount of refugees that we're going to allow into Canada. And then you see it's almost like an auction. I'll take 200, I'll take 100,000, look at, what the government has done is they take a measured approach to immigration. If we need to make sure that people come into this country are safe for Canada's sake, right? There's means, yeah. There's a means test that every other immigrant has to meet to get in this country. Education levels. And basically the question is, what are you bringing to Canada to make us better? And I think that that also needs to be part of the consideration for the people that have stood in line and filled out the applications and been patient and become good, solid Canadian citizens, that we just don't roll the doors open and then let floods of refugees in. There's 65 million refugees in the world. We can take our share, but we should take no more, and we need to make sure that they're safe and will contribute to Canada.
Thank you, Mark. Paul, 1 minute, please.
Could you read the question again for me?
Good idea.
Thank you. I don't think he heard it.
What are your views on increasing immigration to Canada? Many of our programs and resources are already stretched at the expense of some Canadians. Should we be opening doors on a situation that may exacerbate existing problems, Paul? 1 minute, please.
Okay, so the question is about immigration. Not necessarily refugees, but about immigration. We believe that we should have a pathway to citizenship here, that we shouldn't have temporary foreign workers. If we need workers in this country, let's give them a pathway to citizenship. We have a growing seniors population, an aging workforce. That means we need immigrants. We need people to come here with good knowledge base, with skills that can add to our economy. Yes, we need to be helping people that are refugees, 65 million refugees around the world, especially after this last government has been dropping bombs from 5,000 feet and making a mess of the Middle East. Dropping bombs in Libya, where weapons, we all knew, Elizabeth May was the only one to vote against this and said, we know that there's weapon caches in Libya. Those are all going to end up all over the Middle East and in Syria and whatnot. That exacerbated the situation. We need to correct it. We need to take care of people.
Thank you, Paul. And Tim, what are your views on increasing immigration to Canada? Many of our programs and resources are already stretched at the expense of some Canadians. Should we be opening doors to a situation that may exacerbate existing problems?
I ask that all of you take the time to take a look at our policies regarding immigration. Canada's story is about immigration. That is who we are. Recently, there was news reports from the PMO's office that they were screening applications, selecting those that fit the model of a very few people in Ottawa. That's not right. We're willing to invest in the future of Canada, to bring people here, to reunite families, families that have been split because of the current policies, preventing them to come. We live in a community, we're blessed to have Vancouver Island University per capita bringing more international students than virtually any other small university in Canada. Yet these students are not given credit for the time they spend towards their immigration. That's not right. We believe in a more compassionate Canada. Take the time to look at what's happened and what we can do in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. And Sheila, 1 minute, please.
The premise of the question points to this sad decade we've had where there's this feeling of scarcity and a lack of kindness and a lack of welcoming, and the fact that people in Canada are themselves feeling a lack of abundance. So we absolutely, as a country, need to provide affordable housing. We need people to feel secure with good employment, with good food, with dignified retirement. All those pieces need to be in place for the people that are here, living here already. And we need a government that is committed to a welcoming and kind immigration system as well. We need to fix the foreign credential program that is keeping doctors out of our country and out of a position where they can help Canadians. And A great number of us, my family included, we are immigrants at the beginning at our foundation, and we want a government that is kind and welcoming to the next wave.
Thank you, Sheila. And we have a rebuttal. 30 seconds, please, Mark.
You listen to the other candidates, it makes it sound like this is a third world country. Canada is the best nation in the world. Ask the people outside the country, they know it. Now, just regarding the Conservative government has admitted 20% more per year in immigrants than the Liberals did when they were in power, and Justin has promised to shut down the popular Super Visa program that's reunited over 60,000 parents and grandparents with their loved ones since 2012, with the average processing wait times of only 3 months. He's promised to shut that down.
Thank you, Mark. The next question is to two candidates, Sheila and Mark. We'll begin with Sheila, please. How does your party propose to effectively address the infrastructure deficit in our municipalities, sewer, water, and roads? How does your party propose to effectively address the infrastructure deficit in our municipalities? 1 minute, please, Sheila.
We recognize that because of successive decisions by Liberal and Conservative governments, there is a deficit, infrastructure deficit of $178 billion in Canada. And when we partner with local governments and provinces around roads, sewer, water, seismic upgrades, infrastructure investment around value-added processing, whether it's for forestry or whether it's for agricultural products, we all do better. The local community economy workers do better. Our specific proposal is to reach by the end of our first mandate $3.7 billion annually in infrastructure spending. That's from the gas tax. We'd be also protecting apprenticeship positions for students, for example, graduating from VIU, so they can use those projects to gain the work experience they need to push themselves into the professional work world.
Thank you, Sheila. And Mark, please, 1 minute.
Well, the infrastructure, the foot passenger ferry from downtown Nanaimo to downtown Vancouver, it took 18 months of me wrestling every arm I could find in Ottawa to do that. It takes time, it takes effort. And you know, when you look at what the NDP representative has got to South Nanaimo, it's pitiful. The gas tax fund was implemented by the Conservative government to help municipalities with infrastructure, right? And so just remember this in your conversations, that every level of government seems to blame everybody else. Like when you get down to your ever-rising civic taxes, they say, well, they're downloading from the province and the feds. The federal government has increased funding to a number of major programs for years, right? And yet your taxes down at the very level continue to rise. So there are things in place to address this, and the infrastructure spending through the Conservatives has increased far more than it was under the Conservatives, except we will pay for it before we get it.
Thank you, Mark. And Sheila rebuts. 30 seconds, please.
Part of the magic trick around infrastructure investment by the Conservatives is that they repeatedly announce the same projects again and again, and then they underspend them. And another example of that is funding around Veterans Affairs. To be able to say we've increased the budget this much, but then they hold it back. Totally mean-spirited, not transparent, not honest, and not honoring our veterans. Done the same thing with Indigenous programs as well.
Thank you, Sheila. This next question is for Paul Manley. Many people in our community have jobs reliant on fossil fuels and environmentally damaging industries like the oil sands. How do you and the Green Party envision these workers making a transition to a greener economy while still supporting their families? 1 minute, please, Paul.
One of the things that I found knocking on doors in this community was moms at home with young kids while the father was off working in a camp. And there's something wrong with that because young families used to be able to make a go of it here on Vancouver Island, and they should be able to make a go of it here on Vancouver Island. And we need to stop shipping off raw logs. The big problem, our big problem with the oil sands and all these proposed pipelines is that they are exporting raw product. So we have a refinery in Burrard Inlet that can't get enough feedstock to run at capacity because Kinder Morgan wants to export everything. The United States, they don't allow crude oil to be exported from their country. It's against the law. We should be getting value and jobs from our resources. That's what the Norwegians have done. We should be getting good royalties for them. That's the key thing. And we should be able to provide good jobs here in the community.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Paul. We're really running along very well here. We're managing to get as many questions in as possible, so this is terrific and great responses. This next question is for Tim Tessier. The question reads, I believe the Liberal Party is the only party planning to run a deficit. Could you please explain the rationale behind not balancing the budget?
Well, it begins with this. Our leader, Mr. Trudeau, we've decided to take a very courageous step and invest in the future of Canada. In order to provide the services, to provide the infrastructure investment, we have to spend some money now. Now that we're promising, yes, for 2 years, we're going to go in deficit $10 billion per year. It costs our government $278 billion to turn the lights on. That's the budget every year. Over the last several years, the Conservative government has racked up a debt on average of $20 billion of deficit each and every year. We're saying we're going to spend half of that, but we're going to put it into those social and physical infrastructure projects that'll make a difference for our future. That's why we're committed. It is a hard choice to make, but it's a choice we need to make, and it's a choice that's long overdue. To be promising lower taxes and simply shoveling debt into the closet is not the way to do it.
Thank you, Tim. This next question is for both Sheila Malcolmson and Tim Tessier. We'll begin with Sheila, please. Would you support a shift in foreign policy back to a peacekeeping role, coupled with a reduction in military spending and a withdrawal from NATO? Would you support a shift in foreign policy back to a peacekeeping role, coupled with a reduction in military spending and a withdrawal from NATO? 1 minute, please, Sheila.
We're hearing a real longing for a return for Canada to that more traditional peacekeeping role, the kind of Canada that supports peace, that gets in that prevents situations overseas from escalating, as opposed to what we've been seeing the last 10 years of looking like quite a American-style, very hawkish foreign policy. And we would like to return to supporting humanitarian efforts, to supporting training, and more than anything, to supporting our troops when they return from conflicts overseas, doing very hard work on our behalf. We want to support them when they get home. We want to treat them with dignity and with respect. And we want to, as well, decouple our foreign aid spending from trade, which is another path that the Conservatives have taken us down. We've got a lot of work to do to restore our reputation overseas, and an NDP government would like to start that work.
Thank you, Sheila. Paul, 1 minute, please.
Was it me or Tim?
I'm sorry, it's Tim. I apologize. I'll read
agree
the
with Tim.
question again. Would you support a shift in foreign policy back to a peacekeeping role, coupled with a reduction in military spending and a withdrawal from NATO?
Again, I ask you to take a look at the policy online. To answer the question directly, I got most excited about our Prime Minister when Jean Chrétien decided not to follow the alliance into Iraq. I stood back and said, wow, now that's leadership. And history has shown he was one of the most brilliant leaders of his time. I grew up where we wore blue hats. We were humanitarians first, peacekeepers second, and absolutely that's where we want to go. We're not going to do it if there is risk or threat to Canadians. We will be there, and we will invest in our military, and we will support them. But to think that we're currently sending bombers into different parts of the world is not right, and we need a better Canada. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. We have the next question for Mark MacDonald, please. You've been quoted as saying that when Conservatives get back in, we'll need someone on the government side of the table to ensure that we get our fair share of programs and opportunities. Is it the Conservative Party policy to only serve ridings that elect Conservative MPs?
No, that is not the Conservative Party policy, but you have to look at the whole overall arc of how Canadian government works. The NDP says no to everything, almost carte blanche, right? We don't want this, we don't want that. In fact, when there was announcements to be made about funding from the federal government, the NDP said, why aren't we making those announcements? Because you voted against them, right? So the point is this, even provincially, there's the ridings on the island that vote for the BC Liberals are the ones that are the more prosperous ones, and that's part of the system. Is you need to get somebody in there that knows which arm to twist to find the funding. When I went after the foot passenger ferry funding, it took me 18 months. I bet you I lost track of the amount of people that I talked to, and I lost anyway. It's a lot of hard work. And it's not that easy to snap your fingers and the funding appears. You need to know the right people to talk to. You need to know how to make deals.
Thank you, Mark. The next question is for Paul Manley. How are you and your party going to address poverty among all the peoples of Canada? How are you, specifically, and your party going to address poverty among all the peoples of Canada? Paul, 1 minute, please.
Well, what I've mentioned before is that we need a guaranteed livable income to make sure that everybody has the basic needs met. Affordable housing, clothing, and food, good nutritious food. And that's key. So guaranteed livable income, everybody would get it. Other people would get taxed back on it. I'm sure that we'll be asked how we would pay for that. We need to be using our resources properly. And I'll go to the progressive conservative government in Alberta. Peter Lougheed taught the Norwegians about how to use their resources for maximum value. And they followed Peter's plan. They've got $1 trillion in their heritage fund, and they use that fund to make sure that everybody's got enough to live on. They've got free health care, free education. Everybody is taken care of. Here we have a $600 billion debt, and we are a wealthy country with massive resources. What is the problem? Bad business operators.
A rebuttal from Tim Tessier. 30 seconds, please. How are you and your party going to address poverty among all the peoples of Canada?
Okay, 30 seconds. I got 30 seconds. We're going to start with a Canada Child Benefit that will pay families $533 per children under 6 years old. What that represents, economists have said, will bring 315,000 children out of poverty. Further to that, with our historic investment into infrastructure, we're going to build more affordable housing because poverty starts in the house. So we've got to get more homes. We have to be able to support the children. Thank you.
Thank you. We have been receiving so many questions that what we're going to do now is to edit it down to ask questions of all candidates. So each of these questions I have will be for all of the candidates. And we apologize if we didn't get to your specific question, but these are interesting, I think you'll find. Now, to all candidates, we'll begin with Sheila. We would like your comments, please, on these 3 federal policies with local impact. The first one is attempted privatization of Nanaimo's only public boat basin in 2012. Ottawa's revised prostitution law, Bill C-36, after the Supreme Court struck down the old one in 2014. And then the murdered and missing women like Dolores Brown in 2015. So we would like your comments on those 3 federal policies that had local impact. The privatization of the public boat basin, Ottawa's revised prostitution law, Bill C-36, after the Supreme Court struck down the old one, and then the murdered and missing women like Dolores Brown. 1 minute, please.
In 1 minute.
Yes, please.
So, working backwards, in the first 100 days of an NDP government, call an inquiry into the Canadian tragedy of Indigenous murdered and missing women. It should have been done already, and we're going to get it done. On the anti-prostitution, criminalization of prostitution, we would repeal it immediately. It surely would not survive a constitutional challenge. It did not address what the courts asked the Conservative government to do, which is classic, 10 years of fighting in court. We've got to end that. And we cannot, the bill is wrong. And the privatization of harbor resources, we've got to keep these under, or find a way to move our harbors more under local control. There's no reference at this point between local decision-making, federal government, and what the people actually need and want. We've got models around the world that we can do it better, and we're doing it wrong here now.
Thank you, Sheila. And it's going to take me longer than a minute to, in fact, read the question again. But we are mentioning attempted privatization of Nanaimo's only public basin, Ottawa's revised prostitution law, and the murdered and missing women. Please.
The challenge you're going to have is when you listen to us, we agree on a lot of the same stuff. In regards to these 3 areas, privatization, as a citizen of Nanaimo, I was quite concerned. And I do sincerely believe that we have to have more discussion with the municipalities. What does the community want? Privatization, is that the right choice? History shows not. Regarding the anti-prostitution, we also would repeal and agree with the fact that this would never get through the Supreme Court. As well, we would open and engage in a full and thorough investigation murdered and missing women. Going further to that, we support all of the recommendations of the Truth and Reconciliation Report. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. And Paul,
I took notes, don't worry. I wrote them down.
Okay.
So, I was involved in the fight to keep our boat basin public. This is an important asset, and it needs to remain public. And part of the problem was that there was no proper consultation with Nanaimo about this. But the islanders, the protection islanders, this community needs a public facility, and it's not to be privatized and put out for profit and for yachters. In terms of the Supreme Court decision and the criminalization again, I wish we had a government, and I'm looking forward to having a government that respects the Charter of Rights and Freedoms and stops fighting that document over and over and spending hundreds of millions of dollars in the Supreme Court to fight these decisions over and over again. It's getting ridiculous. And we support an inquiry into missing and murdered Aboriginal women and the recommendations in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which Elizabeth May asked to have tabled.
Thank you, Paul. Mark, did you write the questions down too?
Yeah, I think so.
Good, thanks.
Regarding the privatization of the boat basin, I'm not going to defend the process that the Port of Nanaimo went through on that, but let's make it clear. They were not selling the boat basin. It was a private operator who was coming in to provide a solution to problems that have existed there for years and need to be looked at. So it's not talking about selling out pieces of government land. It was an operator that had a solution. It turned out to be the wrong one, but they'll have to come back with another solution. Regarding prostitution laws, I do have a problem when they keep calling it sex trade as if it's the same as a plumber or a lawyer, right? It's a degrading occupation. I understand why people get into it out of necessity sometimes, but we have real problems in this country with human trafficking, where our young daughters are being targeted, even on the school grounds, to turn into prostitutes. I got a problem with that, right?
Thank you. Now, one question. We have a lot of questions to be asked, and we are supposed to be finished by 8:30. And my question is, should we continue for a little while? Okay, good idea. This is for all candidates, please. Since environmental issues are paramount, are you concerned that the greatest emissions of greenhouse gases are due to animal agriculture, mainly factory farms, that these places use immense amount of water and pollute much of our groundwater with feces, antibiotics, and hormones? Do you believe that there is a chance for the health of this planet as long as this cruel and unsustainable mega business continues? Sheila, 1 minute, please. Okay, let's start with Mark. Why not? Since environmental issues are paramount, are you concerned that the greatest emissions of greenhouse gases are due to animal agriculture? Do you believe there's a chance for the health of this planet as long as this cruel and unsustainable mega business continues?
Well, due to bovine extract, is that the question? Look, at everything we do has an environmental impact, whether we like it or not, right? I remember years ago when they were talking about a power plant in town here, I said, it doesn't matter what you do to generate power. You need, whether it's wind farms, and whether it's wave technology, something is going to suffer. What the Conservative government has done is it's the first government in Canadian history to reduce carbon emissions, and they fell by 3.1%. They did this while protecting the Canadian jobs, and the economy grew 12.9%. This is all about balance. We need balance when it comes to environmental things with the jobs that help pay for houses, cars, and raise families.
Thank you, Mark. Paul, please, 1 minute.
Yes, I am concerned. And I'm concerned about the globalization of our food system. 50 years ago, when I was born, 80% of the agriculture that we consumed on this island was grown here. Now we're shipping garlic from China. We're getting food that's processed all over the world because it's competing with our local farmers because it's cheap labor and low environmental standards. We need local food. We need local food security. And we need, to cut back on the greenhouse gases, not just from animal production, but from shipping food all over the world. We can grow food right here. And so we need better regulation on these big animal operations. And we have that proposal in our book, Vision Green. It's something we believe in. We believe in proper animal welfare, and we believe in cutting down on greenhouse gases.
Thank you, Paul. Tim, 1 minute, please.
Read the last part of the question.
Sure. Do you believe that there is a chance for the health of this planet as long as this cruel and unsustainable mega business continues, referring to animal agriculture, mainly factory farms, that these places use immense amounts of water and pollute much of the ground?
You know, I brought this issue up several days ago when we talk about and blame our carbon industry on all of the pollution. And I said, what about those major farms that are scattered throughout our provinces? We have to recognize it is an industry, but the sad thing is, how did we get to having that industry where family farms have been sold off over the years to these mega operations? Not only are they not humane, but they are heavy polluters. And what we need to do is we have to go back and do some assessments. We have to regulate and enforce these polluters. For the most part, they're trying to do their job. But for the other part is they've been running free without those regulations being enforced. We need to go back to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Sheila, 1 minute, please.
Two federal failures here. One is a failure to support small local agriculture. New Democrats have got a pan-Canadian food strategy that we have tried to implement through opposition. We'd like to do it as government. We are seeing right now a bleeding away of support for small farms and a pushing towards mega farms. And a new Democrat government would bring back food safety inspectors and would bring back transparency to the whole meat system. That's a public safety issue. And then the second huger failure is the lack of both Liberal and Conservative leadership on climate change. That Canada has no federal legislation is an international embarrassment. And New Democrats have brought legislation 3 times to Parliament. If we have the honor of forming government, it'll be one of the first things we do. We will get Canada back on track with climate change leadership.
Thank you, Sheila. This question is for all candidates. We'll start with Mark at the end. This writer suggests middle income is $20,000 to $40,000. The BC Liberals took a pay cut some years back for austerity leadership. Federal public servants, especially the middle and upper management pay, is too high. MPs' starting pay is $167,000. Would you discuss a pay cut?
I'm sorry, please ask that question.
Okay, Paul?
No, I don't mind asking. Can you ask it again?
Oh yeah, sorry. The BC Liberals took a pay cut some years back for austerity leadership. The federal public service, especially middle and upper management pay, is too high. MP's starting pay is $167,000. Would you discuss a pay cut?
I think we need to look at a whole bunch of things when it comes to the expense of government. In Nanaimo, you have an average wage at the city about $75,000, and the average income in Nanaimo is about $38,000. That's not really sustainable. Regarding federally, the Prime Minister actually has led the charge to cut back on MPs' pensions. But actually, you wonder why some of the MPs left when they did, because if they did with the changes that are coming in that the Prime Minister has implemented, it would have cost them up to $1 million in pension. So the Prime Minister himself, because he opted out of the pension way back when he started with the Reform Party, is actually the bill that he's introducing is going to cost him $1 million. We never hear that in the media, the media party, but that's the truth. He's been about austerity. He goes to different government departments. He says, let's go dumpster diving and let's cut some percentage out of here and find some savings for the taxpayers. That's what he's done.
Thank you, Mark. Paul, 1 minute, please.
Sure, I would discuss a pay cut. $167,000 starting wage is pretty high. And I think that, you should get your earnings as you get your wings. But we do see these pension plans, the way that MPs have padded their wallets and voted consistently to increase their wages. That's a problem. The other problem is watching people who work their way in government and figure out the favors that they're going to get later on and walk out of office and get themselves a nice, cushy position on board somewhere. And we see this over and over again. It's like not the revolving door that they have in the United States, but we see people in positions of minister, prime minister, walking out and making millions of dollars to get payback for the favors that they've done while they've been in office. That's wrong.
Thank you, Paul. Tim, the BC Liberals took a pay cut some years back for austerity leadership. Would you discuss a pay cut?
Well, let me start with this. It's a shame that Mr. Harper is opting out of the pension plan, or thinking of it. Yes, I will stand before you today, if I'm honored to be elected as your official to represent you in Ottawa for Nanaimo Ladysmith. Whether it's a pay cut, I will stand before you today and commit 25% of my annual income to charity here in Nanaimo. I will make that commitment. I will further make the commitment that any pensions, should I be honored to receive from the people of Canada, I will also commit 25% of that income to a charity here in Nanaimo. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Sheila, 1 minute, please.
Absolutely, I'll discuss anything. If I'm your representative, then we'll be having conversations about all of these pieces. But I think really the question arises from a cynicism about government that the Harper government has engendered. They have spent money on the wrong priorities. We've seen the Senate scandals, spending scandals in the news every day. And that makes people frustrated about how their tax dollars are being spent. The government tells us we can't spend it on pharmacare or on an inquiry into disappeared women in our community, but instead we see the government bribing us with our own money, spending advertising money on TV to talk about its own record. It's wrong. And especially for us to have lost the voice of sciences and frontline public service workers, it's an embarrassment.
Thank you, Sheila. This next question is for all of you. We'll start with Mark at the end. What are your opinions of the growing number of marijuana dispensaries opening up in Nanaimo?
Okay, I'm going to read something to you, right? It's my own words, yes. While courts in Canada have ruled that the government must provide access to marijuana when authorized by a physician, Health Canada does not endorse the use of marijuana, and the Conservative government has put in place new regulations to better protect public health and safety. I've been talking to a good friend of mine who is a doctor, and this is his comment. See, there's lots of people we know use marijuana recreationally, but it is dangerous. Right? And what he says is medical marijuana is legal under a physician's supervision for certain conditions, and he supports this and obeys the law. Right? On the other hand, he doesn't encourage the recreational use of marijuana, noting that it comes with health and societal risks and associated costs, although marijuana has been shown to lessen symptoms in some chronic conditions. I have friends that claim that marijuana use has helped them with cancer. I'm not going to argue with them on it, but the recreational use, we need to keep that drug away from kids, just like we do with alcohol.
Thank you, Mark. Paul, please, 1 minute.
Well, we're not keeping marijuana away from kids. It's being regulated by, recreational marijuana is regulated by organized crime. It's ridiculous, right? So I'm fed up with this, fighting the Constitution, taking things to the Supreme Court again, over and over and over again. We have a Charter of Rights and Freedoms. We have a Supreme Court that has made decisions. We need to respect those decisions. But the Green Party has a policy to legalize, regulate, and tax marijuana. And make sure that we have a system that keeps it out of the hands of our kids, because it's not being kept out of the hands of our kids right now. And we need to educate them properly, and we'll use those tax dollars for education. The system we have now is ridiculous. It's wrong. It's wrong-headed. This criminalization process is a serious problem.
Thank you, Paul. Tim, what are your opinions of the growing number of marijuana dispensaries opening in Nanaimo?
The Liberals led the way on this one. A couple years ago at our annual convention, we passed the resolution to legalize cannabis. But it didn't come with a free-for-all. It came with very strict regulation, very strict education, and we recognized the need for the youth of this country to do a better job. When I asked my daughter how she felt because of my granddaughter Mia being 6, she said, "You know what? At least I won't be worried about Mia being bullied or peer group pressured." She felt that marijuana was easier to get for her child than alcohol was. We need to regulate it and we need to control it. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. 1 minute, please. Sheila?
So this, to me, is evidence of how badly the Conservatives have bungled the file on medical marijuana. The stories I've heard from people that feel themselves to be in deep personal need, people that are desperately ill, feel that this would really make a difference for them, and the runaround that they've been given, the court cases necessary for them to get access to something other than a dried and smokable form, it's mean-spirited, it's wrong, and the Conservatives have just kept throwing up one barrier after the next. So what we need is a return to evidence-based decision-making, science and research on this. We need clear rules so local companies who are investing their money in their industry know what the groundwork is. And as well, a New Democrat government would decriminalize marijuana possession so that no one has to have a criminal record for something like that, and the police can focus where they really should be.
Thank you, Sheila. This next question is for all the candidates, and we'll start with Mark at the end. In an ever-changing geopolitical climate, would you support military alliances outside of NATO, such as working with Russia or Iran if it were needed?
With all due respect, why don't we reverse the order?
Okay,
Thanks.
that's a good idea. Anybody against that idea? No. In an ever-changing geopolitical climate, would you support military alliances outside of NATO, such as working with Russia or Iran, if it were needed?
I think, and New Democrats think, Canada always does better when it works within the internationally recognized bodies, that we get actually a mandate, whether that's the United Nations or whether it's NATO, and then we have a conversation in Parliament in a transparent and democratic way to weigh pros and cons and make each decision one at a time. This ad hoc, go-it-alone cowboy foreign policy is costing lives, and it's eroding Canada's international reputation, and it's got to change.
Thank you, Sheila. Tim, 1 minute, please.
Liberals believe first and foremost in going back to a position in the planet where we offer humanitarian and peacekeeping first. Would we specifically support working or aligning with the Russians or with Iran? I stand before you, and something big would have to change for me to vote for that. We recognize our importance on the United Nations, or pardon me, we lost that seat. So first of all, we would want to get back to working in the United Nations and working with those allies around the world that share the same values and commitments to looking after people. I'm not so certain right now Iran and Russia would fit that model, but let's get back to the United Nations. Let's focus on our NATO alliances and move forward as a better country. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Paul, 1 minute, please.
One of the key principles, we have 6 key principles that guide our policy for the Green Party, and one of them is nonviolence. And so we believe that we need to be working on humanitarian missions around the world and going back to our role as a peacekeeper and going back to our role as a diplomatic power. We had that role before. We should be back on that stage again. That's the respected place to be. We are not a military power. We punched above our weight diplomatically. And we should be working with the UN. Yes, the UN is flawed and it needs reform. And that's something we should be working towards so that we're working together on this planet, all nations, for peace and security, good government, and making sure that we take care of each other properly. We need to reduce violence and war in our world. That's how we're going to get peace and security here.
Thank you, Paul. Mark, 1 minute, please.
It's one of the most difficult questions I've been asked on the campaign trail. I'm a peace-loving man. I don't like answering questions about the military. But I know, the world that we grow up in now is not the world that I grew up in when I was a kid. Remember, Mom used to say, go outside and play, see you at dinner time? You can't do that anymore, right? And you have terrorism that's landed on our shores. The idea that the Conservative government is you deal with it there while you provide humanitarian aid, or it comes to our shores. Regarding agreements, we have NATO agreements and commitments that benefits both ways, right? We help them, they help us. They're with countries that we trust. And regarding Russia, surely someone's not suggesting that we become allies with Russia. Putin is the world's biggest bully, and he's actually, just following the news today, there's some pretty good evidence that he's actually bombing the US-backed people in the Middle East right now. So, no, we don't want to be allied with Russia.
Should I use my rebuttals or no?
Sure. Paul, rebuttal. 30 seconds, please.
Okay. So one of the things we need to do is to sign the International Arms Trade Agreement. That's one agreement that Canada hasn't signed. And what we have seen is the Conservative government selling $15 billion worth of arms to Saudi Arabia. A country that has the same kind of actions that ISIS does. They behead people and they crucify people. So we want peace and security. We need to reduce the arms trade, and we need to do that starting right here at home.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you, candidates. So that is the end of question period for tonight. And speaking of question period in the House of Commons, imagine in a couple of months the Speaker of the House rising and saying, "We recognize the honorable member from Nanaimo Ladysmith." And one of these four people will then address our Parliament, representing everyone in this room and everyone in our constituency. What an honor to be that person. What a responsibility. And what a gift. And we will bestow that gift to one of you in 5 days. So for one last time, let us hear from each of our candidates, focusing on the question, why am I the best to represent Nanaimo Ladysmith in Ottawa? We'll be doing this in reverse order when the opening comments. And the first is Mark MacDonald. And you can't pass on this one, Mark. You have to actually say. Mark MacDonald for the Conservative Party, please. 2 minutes.
Thank you again to the Nanaimo Chamber for giving us this opportunity today. We really appreciate it. I've listened to the candidates again tonight in this debate, and there's one thing that is crystal clear. The other candidates are on an unbelievable shopping spree in an attempt to buy your vote, with no credible plan to pay for the promises that they're making. In this election, Canada has a stark choice to make. While Canada's economy is stronger than most, make no mistake, the global economy is fragile. We need to stay the course. Justin's Liberals promise tax hikes, massive deficits, and less money for your children's education to buy or fix up a home, save for retirement, or pass your family's wealth to the next generation. Our party is the only one that will open up Canada to world trade agreements like the historic Trans-Pacific Partnership and add more than 700,000 new homeowners by 2020. And of course, we're the only party that will provide funding for the foot passenger service from the downtown Nanaimo to Vancouver, a project I personally worked on for over the past year and a half. In contrast, the Liberals will raise personal payroll taxes on families, seniors, workers, small businesses, saddle our children and grandchildren with debt, and put hundreds of thousands of Canadian jobs at risk. On the other hand, the NDP can't be trusted to do what they say they will. They've ruined the economy everywhere they've held government. Friends, this election comes down to choices, and believe me, it couldn't be more clear. I'm seeking your vote on October 19th so that I can continue a tradition of service to this community, which includes working toward the expansion of the airport. That's been a tremendous success. The creation of the Learn at Home online learning program has resulted in over $4 million in funding staying back into the district. And this is in addition to a long line of community building projects I've been involved with over the years. So friends, Nanaimo Ladysmith deserves an MP on the government side of the House. This election is critical, not just for the country, but for this community as well. On October 19th, the vote for Mark MacDonald means keeping taxes low, protecting local jobs and paychecks, and keeping Canadians safe at home and abroad. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. Tim Tessier is next. Tim, 2 minutes, please.
Thank God for the bell. I stand before you humbled. The lessons I have learned over the last months, the people that I've spoken to, the emotions that I've heard, the tears that I've seen, that's what this is about. Dollars and cents won't solve the problems. What solves the problem is some compassion and passion and moving towards a better place. When we go back to Ottawa, we will have one of the most unique situations that any British Parliament has ever seen, where we have 3 core parties with similar number of seats. That will be a reality. Now, what is the other reality is, in order to move government forward, you're going to need support of 2 of those 3. That's what we're facing. So what you're facing as the citizens here in Nanaimo Ladysmith is, what is your choice? What is your vote worth? This morning I had the opportunity, while I could have been out campaigning, I was invited to sit with some grade 2 and 3 students out in Ladysmith. And they asked me this question: why should I vote? Ask yourself that question. Why should you vote? And I said to them, because they had a board on the wall and they had voted for the different parties, and I said to them, how did you feel when you saw your tick mark go up on the list? And they all grinned and smiled and they said, it felt really good. And that's what you have to do, is feel real good about your vote. Make sure you educate yourself about the best choice and feel good. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. And for her closing remarks, please welcome Sheila for 2 minutes, please.
Thank you to the audience and to the organizers and the huge turnout. You're rebutting all the myths about voter apathy and people being burned out and turned off by this election process. Thank you. And this is one of the things that reminds me how much I love this place, how much people care about the community, how much people care about the region. I had an experience last week sitting down with the grade 3 class on Seminas Reserve. Grade 3, they're asking about election priorities, and these are the 4 questions they asked me. What will you do to have every kid have food? Every kid have clean water? Every kid have a house? Every kid, what will you do to make sure every kid has a family? Those were killer questions, and they get right at the heart of some hard times in our region, especially the last 10 years. And they put that fire in my belly again to bring real change to the federal government and real change for and with our region. And the Canada that I want is a Canada that leads on climate change. A Canada, a federal government that puts people first and the planet first. And a country that invests in childcare, affordable childcare, so women can go to work, so life can be more affordable for families. We want a government that will put in place an environmental Bill of Rights, one that will honor relationship with Indigenous people, one that prioritizes, as Tom Mulcair did last week. My first priority is repairing the damaged relationship with Indigenous people. Here, New Democrats are the ones that can beat the Conservatives. I would be honored to be your member of Parliament and work with you and for you.
Thank you, Sheila. And Paul Manley, please. 2 minutes.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for coming. Good things come from minority governments, and we're heading towards a minority. We had a minority government in the 60s, and that's how we got our social programs, Medicare, CPP, and EI. The Green Party is the party with a big, bold vision this time around. And we want to be the conscience in Parliament. We want to be the ones that hold those other parties to account and make them keep their promises. Make them keep their promises for electoral reform. Right now, three men decide how most of Parliament votes. They might as well hold up a group of proxy cards and say, this is how my gang's voting. And here's their speaking notes. I can tell you, as your member of Parliament, I will speak for you. I will not be told how to think, what to say, or how to vote by bureaucrats in Ottawa. That's your job. That's your job to tell me what to do. Everybody's been talking about change in this country. We have seen radical change in the last 9 years, and we are going to get our country back. I will stand up and defend our coast. I will defend our climate. I will defend our social programs. And I will always put the rights of Canadians ahead of foreign corporations. We have, stop cheering, we have a lot of momentum in this riding, and we have the opportunity to win. And you have the opportunity to do something historic in this riding and do what 1 million people across Canada want, and that's elect a Green MP. We have unprecedented support in this riding and huge momentum, and the advanced polls show us that Stephen Harper is not going to win. Thank you.
So is Nick, thank you. So is this a charged room a little bit? For the 5 people who put their hands up at the beginning of the meeting to say they were undecided, have we helped those 5 people out tonight? This has been an extremely exciting night. I thank you all for attending. I thank the candidates an awful lot for attending because it's them that brought you here tonight.